Well, good morning all. Good morning online. I have a notice just before we kick off. There we are, new to Kings. If you're here this morning, you're new. If you're watching online, you're new. If you're catching up and you're new, you haven't made contact, connection. We've got a Zoom meeting this Thursday, 8 o'clock online. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to chat with you. I can introduce the church to you. You can meet some other newcomers. So if that's you, what you have to do is sign up. KCA Church events is the best place to sign, or you can use that clever QR code thing. Flourish didn't have one of them on theirs, did they? So there you go. There we are. Say no more. That's there. Hope to see you on Thursday. Also, if you're online, if you're in the room, you know this. If you're online, we'll be doing communion later on. Did Jane say that already? You did, didn't you? No. So get your communion ready if you're online. Well, good morning. So we're coming to the end this morning of our series on David, the life of David. This morning I want to look at three different passages from the end of David's life. Now, as some of you know, I turned 60 a few weeks ago, so I'm still a young chap, still fit and healthy, if I don't eat too many pizzas. But even so, I'm old enough that I catch myself thinking sometimes, will I be remembered after I'm gone? I catch myself thinking, I think it's a normal part of being human. I don't want to just disappear. I want to leave some mark, some lasting impression, a legacy, if you like, if that's not too grand. Now, with my conscious mind, I don't think like that at all, but there's something inside, there's an impulse that I recognize. I'm wired like that, and it surprised me, but there we are. I don't know if you feel like that. But what will they say about me after I'm gone? How will they remember me? And then how would I like to be remembered? What would I like them to say? So here we go, look at this. That's my gravestone, could be your gravestone. As you can see, it's blank. So what would you like to be written on it? I know the bit about, loving father and devoted husband and all the rest of it, but after that, there's one line, isn't there? One line that sums you up, that sums up your life. What would your epitaph be? Because the truth is, you see, not many of us will leave any great tangible mark, will we? Not many of us will stand out in any obvious way for ages to come for the great things we've done. In fact, the Bible says all men are like grass. Psalm 103, we flourish like a flower in the field. The wind blows over it and it's gone, and its place remembers it no more. That's pretty strong, isn't it? Even the ground where the flower grew doesn't remember it. It's gone. And we're like that, the Bible says. So let me ask you again, what would you like to be on your gravestone? What will you want to have done with your life by the end of it? What's it for, this one short life that you've been given? Well, here's David's epitaph, if you like. This is David's memorial. We find this in Acts 13:36. Paul is speaking in Antioch, and he says of David these words. Now, when David had served the purpose of God in his own generation, he fell asleep. There you are, right there. That's his epitaph. David served the purpose of God in his own generation. Now, I've got three things to say about the end of David's life. That's the first one. If David had a grave down in the Old Town Cemetery or Stanley Hill Cemetery, that's what he'd have on it. David served the purpose of God in his own generation. Now, there's several things to say about that. Firstly, it's God-centered, isn't it? It's not David-centered. It doesn't say David, after he killed Goliath, fell asleep. Now, fell asleep means died. You get that? It's a bit weird otherwise. It doesn't say David, after great victories in battle, after conquering all Israel's enemies, he fell asleep. David, after bringing the ark back to Jerusalem, after making Israel great, he fell asleep. It doesn't say that. You see, none of that stuff is the important bit in God's eyes. In God's eyes, the truly great thing you could say about David was that he served God's purpose in his own generation. He did what God wanted. And if that's so, then it doesn't matter what things you did and whether they were great or small in human terms. All that matters is, were they the things God wanted you to do? See, David writes in Psalm 40, here I am, I have come. It's written about me in your scroll. I desire to do your will, oh my God. And the writer of the Hebrews picks up those same words. He says they're actually the words of Jesus when he came into the world. Here I am, I've come to do your will, oh my God. John's Gospel, chapter 6, Jesus says, I've come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but to do the will of him who sent me. Chapter 4, he says, my food is to do the will of him who sent me. That's the thing that truly nourishes me. That's what gives me strength. That's what builds me up to do his will. That's what drove Jesus. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 5, we make it our goal to please him. That's our target. That's our aim for every new day. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive what is due to him for the things done in the body, whether good or bad. You see, that's why it matters. So David served the purposes of God in his own generation. Despite his disastrous failures, he did the will of God. That's the greatest thing any of us can do with our life. So it's not about our achievements, it's about God's purposes. It's not about a legacy for ourselves. We have to leave the big picture to him. We get to play our part, big or small, in our generation. That's all. And then we leave the stage. Someone else's turn. And it's not even about our choices. David wanted to build the temple, didn't he? God said, no, sorry, David, sorry. Your job is to fight the battles. I want a man of peace to build my temple. That'll be your son, not you. See, it's not primarily about God blessing our little story, although so often he does. Actually, it's about us getting to join in his great big story, as Stuart told us last week. And there's nothing greater in life than that. And the wonderful thing is, there's a part in his script for all of us. So we just need to ask him, Lord, where do you want me to stand? What are my lines? What's my role? Big speaking part. Wow, oh, all right then. Part of the crowd scene. Okay, that's fine. Anything just to help the big production. It's not about me. So let me ask you, are you serving his purpose today in your generation, in our generation? Are you deliberately, intentionally seeking to do the will of God, to please him every day of your life? In The Sound of Music, at the start of the film, we find Maria, the trainee nun, struggling to fit in at the abbey, and the mother abbess asks her, tell me, Maria, what is the most important lesson you've learned here? And Maria answers, to find out what is the will of God and to do it. Even if it's hard to accept, even then. Then comes the reply, Maria, it seems to be the will of God that you leave us. That, of course, is the last thing Maria wants to hear. But she obeys, and for her, the will of God turns out to be something greater and more wonderful than she could have thought. Now, that, of course, is Hollywood. It's the land of happy endings. But even so, that's pretty good theology, to find out what the will of God is and to do it. So do you know what it is for you, the will of God? Might be something very ordinary, seemingly very small, right at hand. Love your neighbour as yourself. Love your wife. Be an honourable, hard-working employee. Volunteer at school or in the community. But it's important to find out what it is so that you can do it. Now, some of it I know is already clear from Scripture. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbour as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these, Jesus said. We talked about that a few weeks ago. But are you doing all the will of God that he has set in front of you? All that he has already revealed to you? All that you know that's already on your plate? Are you doing it wholeheartedly? Because that's the today question. If not, then don't expect to move on. Start today. Be faithful in small things, and God will surely lead you on to other things in his way, in his time. And you can ask him, Lord, what should I do today, this week, this year? What can I do to please you, to serve your purpose in my generation? And I can tell you what part of the answer will be. If you're part of this church, part of the answer will be to be here on a Sunday morning, to be part of the body that gathers together, not to be absent. It will be to love and bless and serve others in this body, one to one, in ways both visible and often invisible, except perhaps to one or two others and to God. It will be to join in serving here as part of the ministry of this church, both here and in the community, in the kids' work or with the youth or with Make Lunch or the furniture project. There's plenty you can get involved with if you just want to serve his purpose here and aren't too fussy about how you do it. If you're not sure, come and talk to us. We'll gladly help you. And let me say too, for some of you, God may be calling you to commit further here, to take on some leadership role. There may be an investment required there, which would mean you have to say no to some other things. But one thing is for sure, God has put you on this earth to count, to matter, by doing his will and by serving his purposes in whatever way, big or small, that he chooses. And the important thing for us is to find his will and to do it, not to waste this one short life as it passes us by, and then stand before him at the end with nothing to show for it, nothing to offer him, nothing solid, built through the Spirit on the foundation of Jesus Christ, the only foundation, Paul says, on which anything of substance and worth can ever be built. In those terrible words, don't stand before him, save soul, wasted life. Don't let that be you. So David served the purpose of God in his generation, as each of us is called to do. Second thing is this: David invested heavily in future generations, in the future work of God that would outlive him. See, God had set limits for David. He couldn't do what he had in his heart to do. As he says in 1 Chronicles 28, he couldn't build the temple for God that he'd already made plans to build. For us too, there may be things that we would love to do, but we can't. There may be things we'd love to see, but we'll never see in our lifetime. But we can still invest in those things while we are here. See, David accepted his God-given limitations. He got over the fact that there were things he was called to see and to do and things he would never see that he had to leave for others to do, in this case his son Solomon. But it didn't stop him investing in it towards the end of his life in quite a remarkable way. Let's look at the text or go through it. 1 Chronicles 21. David, in his own words, has sinned greatly. God sends an angel to bring a terrible plague on the people of Israel. 70,000 men die, it says, until God says enough. And the angel tells David to go build an altar on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite in Jerusalem to stop the plague. So David goes to find Araunah and he offers him full price for the land he needs to build this altar. Araunah says, no, you're the king. You don't have to pay. Forget it. I don't want your money. But David insists on paying full price. This is what he says: I will not sacrifice to the Lord that which costs me nothing. This same land that David insists on paying for, it then becomes the site of the temple that Solomon is to build. At the end of 1 Chronicles, shortly before David dies, he calls an assembly, all the leaders, all the officials of the people, and he does two things. Firstly, he gives Solomon very detailed plans for the building of the temple. Now, this isn't trying to be a backseat driver, trying to control it after he dies. Rather, the text says he gave him the plans of all that the Spirit had put in his mind. It's from the hand of the Lord upon me, he says. He's given me understanding. And then the second thing is he gives financially to the task. And he gives extravagantly. Chapter 29, he's already provided for the temple vast amounts of gold and silver and precious stones and a whole lot more. And now he says, over and above that, in my devotion to the temple of my God, I now give my personal treasures of gold and silver. So he's given from the state coffers. He now gives generously from his own pocket. And then he challenges the leaders. He says, now who is willing to consecrate himself to the Lord today? And it says they respond willingly. They respond magnificently. It says the people rejoiced at the willing response of their leaders. David rejoiced. They gave freely and wholeheartedly to the Lord. There was great joy. And David praises God in chapter 29, verse 12. Yours, O Lord, he says, yours is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor, for everything in heaven and earth is yours. Wealth and honor come from you. And then he continues, who am I? Who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? Everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your hand. Now I smile because I've no idea whether it's coincidence or God's providence that we're looking at this passage at the time of our gift day. David Patterson told us last week about the £2.2 million that church members gave over a period of 20 plus years so that we could relocate up from the old town to build this premises here, because we believed it was a call of God. We believed we had to be where the people were, with a user-friendly facility as a tool so that we could reach out to them and serve them and reach them with the gospel of Jesus. And I smile because I know many of the people who gave incredibly generously over many years never saw this building built, just as David never saw the temple built. Many of them are no longer here enjoying the blessing of God in this place as we do today. But you see, like David, the Spirit had put his plans in their minds. Like David, God had given them understanding about his purposes. Like David, they weren't prepared to give to the Lord what cost them nothing. So they dug deep. Like David and the other leaders of Israel, they gave generously to the Lord, knowing they were only giving back what had come from him and from his hand in the first place. But you see, that's the thing. When God gets hold of your heart, when you see how much he's blessed you, when he gives you a glimpse of something of the greatness of his purposes, and he calls you to be just a small part of it, then you give. You give gladly, because it's so wonderful to give to God in order that his kingdom might come, and he may be glorified, and lives may be saved. It doesn't matter tuppence whether you get to see it or you're part of it further down the line, because you're giving to him. And if you think that could ever possibly be money wasted, then you've got a spiritual screw loose. So I would encourage you this morning, like David, serve the purpose of God in your generation. Like David, invest heavily in the work of God. Not just financing the here and now, which of course is important, but also providing for future generations, for growth, for ministry that lies ahead, for a future harvest that you may never see, just like those others did who've gone before in this church. Now it's our turn. So I'm glad our gift day is still open. It's not too late to give. I'm glad it's never too late to commit to start giving regularly, to tithe. Who's willing to consecrate himself to the Lord today? That was David's question. Consecrate. The word means you give yourself fully to God and to his purposes. Are you willing to do that today? You see, you've only got one life. So be wise. Use it to serve his purposes. Do the will of God. Then you'll leave an eternal legacy. While you live that one life, you have a measure of financial resource. Be wise. Invest it where it will build God's kingdom and have an impact for eternity. And you will gain an eternal inheritance. It may all be invisible to you here on earth, but not in heaven. And just briefly, invest yourself in people too. To encourage, to strengthen, to nurture others. See, David, in this last episode of his life, 1 Chronicles 28, he addresses the leaders and officials. Be careful, he says, to follow all the commands of the Lord your God, that you may possess this good land and pass it on as an inheritance to your descendants forever. See, it's not for his good he's saying it. He's concerned for them after he's gone. He wants them to succeed, not to mess it up, so that they and others to come might be blessed. So he wants to put some deposit into them with his last words. And you, my son Solomon, he says, Solomon, acknowledge the God of your father. Serve him with wholehearted devotion and with a willing mind. If you seek him, Solomon, he'll be found by you. The Lord has chosen you to build a temple. Be strong, Solomon, and do the work. That's the other way, you see, we can leave an eternal mark. We can put a deposit into other people's lives. We can point them consistently to God. We can encourage them to remain faithful when it's hard and to embrace all that God has for them to do. That instruction to Solomon is a word for some here today. Be strong and do the work. Don't shrink back from what you know God is asking you to do. Commit to it and he will help you and you'll bear eternal fruit. That's a wonderful thing, you see, about children's work, from the very youngest upwards. It's not just childcare, it's not just entertainment, keeping them happy. It's not that, it's the work of God. You get to plant little kingdom mustard seeds into good soil that in time, in 10, in 15, 20 years, will become a great kingdom tree in those young lives that will be a blessing to many others. Birds will come and nest in the branches. No one will ever know the contribution you made all those years before. You'll get no credit. You'll probably never see it. But God will know. One day he'll show you what you did. And you'll be so glad that you invested well. See, that's the heart of what I'm trying to say this morning. It's not to badger you. It's not to cajole you or to guilt you into giving or into serving. I just want to encourage you to use everything you have in this life to count in the ways that really matter, so that one day you'll look back at what God has done with your little life and you'll say, I'm so glad I gave him as much as I did. I'm so glad I served his purposes. I'm so glad I invested well. I only wish I'd given even more. Well, we started with David's epitaph, as I've called it. Let's finish with David's last words, shall we? We find these in 2 Samuel 23. These are the last words of David, it says in verse 1 of that chapter. The Spirit of the Lord spoke through me. His word was on my tongue. The God of Israel spoke. The Rock of Israel said to me, when one rules over people in righteousness, when he rules in the fear of God, he is like the light of the morning at sunrise on a cloudless morning, like the brightness after rain that brings grass from the earth. Is not my house right with God? Has he not made with me an everlasting covenant, arranged and secured in every part? Will he not bring to fruition my salvation and grant me my every desire? But evil men are all to be cast aside like thorns, which are not gathered with the hand. Whoever touches thorns uses a tool of iron or the shaft of a spear. They're burned up where they lie. Now, it probably means his last prophetically inspired words, not literally the last words he ever spoke. But it's that middle section that leapt out at me, reading these words. Is not my house right with God, David says. Now, you could well ask, David, what do you mean? How could you possibly say that? Your house is a disaster. You sinned catastrophically with Bathsheba. God told you then that because of your sin, the sword would never depart from your house. That was true. 4 of your sons died because of your sin. One of them killed one of the others. 2 of them separately rebelled against you and wanted to kill you. You had to abandon your palace and clear out of Jerusalem fast to save your own skin. You could have enjoyed years of peace, but you blew it. Not long ago, your sin brought down this plague on Israel. How can you tell me your house is right with God? And yet instead of being consumed with guilt and with shame, instead of being eaten up with regret for what he'd lost and what might have been, David is at peace at the end. Is not my house right with God? Isn't everything okay after all? Why? Because God has made an everlasting covenant with me. Praise its name. It's not about what I've done wrong. It's about what he has done for me. The future of my house is eternally secure. I know that because of his promises. Whatever I've done wrong, and there's plenty, it doesn't matter now because it's all in his hands. I know he will bring to fruition my salvation. He will grant me my every desire. I never got to build the temple I wanted either, but that's okay too. Solomon will build it instead. It will get built. God will get the glory. That's all that matters. My house is right with God. I'm at peace as I come to the end. Reminds me of Moses. You remember, God told Moses because of his sin, he wouldn't enter the promised land that it had been his life's work to lead the people to take possession of. But at the very end of his life, when they were there at the Jordan, they're ready to go in, God tells Moses, Moses, climb up Mount Nebo. Go right up to the top. Moses, you're going to die there at the top of that mountain. But first, you're going to see the land. And he shows him from the top of the mountain. The whole expanse of Canaan stretched out before him. There it is, Moses, he says. That's the land I promised all that time ago to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob. You're not going in, but your people will. And Moses, I wanted you to see it with your own eyes before you die. And you can be sure Moses died at peace. God wasn't taunting him. God was being kind to him. It's the kindness of God. Yes, of course, Moses would love to have gone in himself. Of course he would. But he knew the people were going to get in. And he knew that God was faithful to his promises, and that was all that mattered. I'd like us just to watch a video clip as we close. This is Martin Luther King. He's come to Memphis to speak at a church in support of black workers in the city who'd been treated unfairly. It's all part of his ongoing campaign for civil rights, for justice, for the black community in America. And this is the last speech of his life, because he was shot and killed the next day. Now, when he comes and gives this speech, he knows there have been threats made against him. He's just addressed that in his speech. And then this is how he finishes his speech. Let's watch this.
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Well, I don't know.
Now, he didn't know he was going to be murdered the next day, but God had prepared him. Like David, like Moses, despite all that was not fulfilled, he was at peace. Now listen, we are all very flawed human beings. Like David, like Moses, like Martin Luther King himself, we've all done many things wrong. Things we could rightly be thoroughly ashamed of. Things we could continue to carry with us to the grave. There are things we have not done that we could have done, but we missed the chance. There are things we could grieve over that we hoped for, but which to this day remain unfulfilled. We could carry with us guilt, regret, disappointment until the day we die. People we hurt and let down. Costly sin that changed the course of our lives. Wasted years where we made bad choices. God-given dreams that never materialized. Healings we'd hoped for that never happened. Promises about our children that haven't yet come to pass. Failures, what ifs, not yets, might have beens. These things could cripple us until the day we die. Unless you realize there's something far bigger. It's called the grace, the love, the boundless mercy of an infinite God who knows how we are made and who is rich, rich in mercy when we bring our guilt and our mess and our failures to him. Because you see, if you're a Christian, then like David, he's made an everlasting covenant with you. It's secure and arranged in every part. It's unshakable. It's sealed in the blood of his son, Jesus Christ, who died to bring it about. So all the things you can't control, you can't influence, you can no longer change, you have to give them over and entrust them to him and then let go of them. Holding on does no good. He alone is the one who makes all things new, who redeems our failures, who works all things towards good for those who love him. See, the great thing about David isn't that he was perfect, very far from it. The great thing was that he was repentant, he was forgiven, and to his dying day he never stopped seeking after God. Whatever the mess that had gone before. And he knew that because of God's promises, he would see God's glory for eternity. His salvation would be complete. His every desire would be satisfied. All his failures swallowed up marvelously in God's redemptive plans. You see, Jesus is the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. It is he who will have the last word over your failures, the pain, the disappointments of your life when you give them to him. There is a peace that goes beyond human rationality, that goes beyond human understanding, that can be yours. When you bring these things to him and say, Lord, I trust all this to you now. I hand it over to you and I let go. These things are now your responsibility, not mine. I cannot resolve or complete them, so I entrust them to you. And I ask that in return, you will give me your peace. Thank you that, like David, I'm forgiven. Thank you that you've made an everlasting covenant with me. Thank you that you will bring my salvation to completion. You will grant my every desire because I will see you face to face. Amen.